I'm never gonna be friendly to the new kid again. It's not like they're a bad person, it's just something about them makes my skin crawl. All the kids at school gave him a wide berth and avoided him like the plague, but I tried to be nice, at least to start with. I mean, why wouldn't you be nice to the new guy? I've been a new guy before and I know how it feels. Or I thought I did. Hey David, you're really cool. Thanks, man, you too. I hope you had a good first day. I did. Thanks. Say, I was wondering, do you want to come have a sleepover at my house? Yeah, sure, why not? I didn't want to. Heck, it wasn't like he was my friend or anything, but I still felt slightly obligated to be friendly to him, and so I decided to go along with it. The few minutes of school left passed quickly, and I was soon on my bike and headed over to the address he had given me. When I arrived at his place, it was all kinds of wrong. There were busted windows and broken furniture littering the lawn, and none of the lights were working despite it being nighttime. Still, I wanted to give him a chance, so I went in anyway. Once inside, everything seemed okay, if a little different from what I was used to. Strange paintings hung on the walls, and there wasn't much in terms of furniture, but we managed to make ourselves comfortable enough by playing video games together, until eventually we decided to go to bed. One thing that was weird, however, was that I hadn't met his parents. They didn't seem to be anywhere. I couldn't help but be curious, and so I decided to ask him why. David looked away from me. They're out right now. A party. Oh, I get it. Cool. I didn't get it, but I figured he had his own reasons. Maybe his parents were drunk and he didn't want to talk about it. We both got ready for bed and eventually fell asleep, or at least I did. I'm not sure if he ever did. I woke up in the middle of the night, a weird feeling making me stir from my dreams. I didn't know what made me wake up, but when I cracked my eyes open, I saw David standing there with a pipe raised above his head and an unsettling glint in his eyes. He was just standing there, grinning wider and wider as he watched me. I laid motionless, my breath stuck in my throat, terrified at what he was going to do next. What made it even worse was his appearance. He might have been short and slightly chubby, yeah, but his broad arms and hands were raised sky high with a pipe. His eyes had wrinkles on wrinkles beneath them, and his small mouth quivered with excitement. His fat folds jiggled beneath his clothes as he shifted slightly. After what felt like an eternity, he finally dropped the pipe and began to draw something on a drawing board I hadn't noticed before. I could only make out some of the details in the low light, but it looked like he was drawing a man and a woman, with both of them looking not so alive at the moment. Suddenly, however, he began drawing a third character. This was when I realized exactly what he was drawing. The third character stood above the other two, holding what was clearly a pipe. He was drawing a picture of himself and what he had done to his parents. My heart was racing, and the room started to spin as I tried to think of a way out of this situation. I was about to move when I realized he had noticed as well. He quickly wiped the drawing board off and turned toward me again, grabbing his pipe. I inched my fingers toward my phone, but he began to speak. You're not going to be able to call your parents, David. I'll do to them what I did to mine. What do you mean? Why are you awake? I tried to play innocent, but he wasn't buying it. I saw you stirring while I drew my picture. You saw it, didn't you? The fear crept up my spine. He lunged forward and grabbed my arm, dragging me away from the door. He dropped me to the ground, then quickly bolted out the door, locking it behind him. I heard him mumble something about making this quick as he scrambled to lock the windows as well. That's when it hit me. He was going to off me. He wanted me gone, just like his parents. I started to panic, but I also knew this was my only chance. I had to make it out alive. I ran to the window. I could hear myself struggling to find something outside, presumably something to silence me with, but I was already pushing the window open. I heard it creak and crack as it moved, but I pushed through and started to climb out. Once outside, I ran as fast as I could. The streets were empty, save for the occasional car or two. I heard a scream of anger behind me, and I turned around, watching as he ran from the house, his pipe held high. But I didn't stop running. I kept running until I reached the safety of my parents' house. The police came soon after I made it home. They said they found evidence that David had been living on his own since his parents had gone missing, but there was no proof that he had gotten rid of them. That's when I realized how lucky I had been to escape from David's house alive. The worst part about this, though, is that because the police couldn't find any evidence, he's not going to jail. Luckily for me, he'll have to transfer since he'll be sent to an adoption agency. What's creeping me out, however, is that on the day he left, someone slid a letter into my parents' mailbox with a note scribbled on it. If you want to meet my parents so badly, I can help. It freaks me out to think that sometime in the future, he might just escape the adoption agency and come back here for revenge.
My life was pretty ordinary. I had a decent job, good friends, and Holly, my poodle, who thought I hung the moon. I was around 200 pounds. Some days I felt fine about it, other days not so much. Then my sister got engaged and asked me to be her maid of honor. The wedding was in 6 months, and I wanted to look good in the photos, so I decided to start small. Morning walks with Holly before work. That winter morning was my third try. The first 2 times I gave up after 10 minutes, but this time felt different. The frost made everything look clean. Holly walked next to me, her leash jingling, and for the first time in a while I felt relaxed. We'd been out maybe 20 minutes when I saw some guy near an adjacent alley to the sidewalk. He was crouched by a fire in a metal drum. The flames made his face look strange and waxy. His clothes were torn and filthy, hanging off him like rags. I thought of turning around, but then shrugged it off and told myself I was being paranoid. He was probably some homeless guy trying to stay warm. My next thought was to walk past him before he noticed me. But as I took a couple of steps, he looked up. His mouth stretched into a slow, wide grin. His yellow teeth were illuminated by the firelight. "Morning," he said, voice rough and oddly cheerful. I nodded and tried to walk past quickly, pulling Holly closer, but he stood up and blocked the sidewalk. "That's a nice dog." He stepped toward us. "Real nice. What's its name?" Holly started growling low in her throat, sensing a threat. "We have to go," I said, trying to move around him. He moved with me, then he reached for Holly. "Let me see her." "No, He grabbed Holly's leash and yanked it out of my hand. Holly yelped and tried to back away, but he pulled her toward him and then toward the fire. "Hey, stop! What are you doing?" He laughed, this dry, rasping sound. "What a perfect meal. Gonna roast you slow and crispy. Been hungry for days." He picked Holly up by her scruff. She was snarling now, snapping at his hands. Her legs were thrashing wildly. He held her over the flames, and I could see the heat starting to singe her fur. I screamed and rushed at him. Holly twisted and bit down hard on his wrist. He dropped her, screaming in pain. I didn't think. I just kicked him in the shin as hard as I could, scooped Holly up, and ran. "You witch!" His voice echoed behind me. I heard his footsteps, heavy boots pounding the pavement. He was coming after me. "You can't outrun me, girl!" His voice was getting closer. "Look at you!" "You're already slowing down." He was right. My lungs were burning after half a block. My legs felt like they weighed a ton. Holly was shaking in my arms, whimpering. My house was 3 blocks away. I wasn't going to make it. But I kept going anyway. I had to. If I stopped, he'd take Holly and throw her in that fire. I saw a pile of construction gravel on the corner. Without thinking, I grabbed a handful of rocks and hurled them behind me. I heard him curse as one hit. It bought me maybe 5 seconds to catch my breath. 1 block down. My vision was going spotty. My chest felt like it was being crushed. But Holly's heartbeat was pounding against my ribs, and I forced my legs to keep moving. I grabbed more rocks at the next corner, threw them wild, and heard him stumble. "Come back here!" His voice was farther away now, out of breath too. I was 2 blocks down. Sweat was pouring down my face. My lungs felt like they were on fire. Every breath was a fight. I was nearly sobbing. Then I saw my building. Relief hit me so hard I almost stumbled. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my keys. But I got the door open, stumbled inside, and slammed it shut. My legs gave out, and I collapsed against it with Holly still in my arms. Through the window, I saw him stop halfway down the block. He stood there for a couple of minutes before he turned and walked away, laughing and skipping like it had all been some sick game. I sat on my floor for an hour holding Holly and crying. Called the cops, but they said without injuries or a better description they couldn't do much. They told me to be careful walking alone. That should have ended it. Should have sent me straight back to hiding in my apartment. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. That guy was right. I was slow. I struggled. But I still outran him when it mattered most. And I realized something that morning. I didn't need to lose weight to look good in wedding photos. I needed to be strong enough to protect myself and those who mattered. So I kept walking. I also joined a kickboxing basics class at the gym near my work. It's brutal. I pant after 5 minutes. Sometimes I get so dizzy I have to sit down. Once, I actually passed out during warm-ups and woke up to the instructor fanning me with a towel. But you know what? I'd rather pass out in a gym surrounded by people than on a street where some psycho can grab my dog or do worse to me. I carry pepper spray too, just in case, and take different routes. I'm learning how to throw a proper punch and how to use my weight as an advantage instead of a weakness. My sister's wedding is in 2 weeks. My transformation ain't miraculous. I probably won't look that different in the photos, but I can run 3 blocks without stopping now. I can throw a decent hook. I can defend myself. And yeah, I still have bad days. Days when I'm exhausted and sore and wondering why I'm putting myself through this. But then I look at Holly, alive and safe, curled up on my couch, and I remember that my body worked when I wanted it to. It saved something I love.
I was 15 and felt too old this year to be going around in a costume trick-or-treating on Halloween. Instead, I hung out with my friend Aiden, kinda just hanging out in my room and being bored. It felt like we should be doing something, because it was Halloween. Not only that, but my parents were gone for a work party in the city, so we had the whole house to ourselves for the rest of the night. After a while, we couldn't decide on anything cool, so we did the most unoriginal thing and went to the basement to watch a Halloween/horror movie. We found something decent and turned it on, then turned off all the lights. The basement was already kind of a spooky place in the house, being unfinished and with boxes and random stuff stored all around. Basically, there was just a couch right in the middle and a small TV in front of it. It was usually where my dad went to have a couple beers and stay up late while everyone else was sleeping. Anyway, we watched the movie for a while, getting past the introduction and whatever. But then we heard a thump. Both of us looked at each other, then paused the movie. The house was quiet. I thought it might have actually been from the movie, so I rewinded it and played it back. But there wasn't anything even close to what we heard. From the basement, everything upstairs sounded muffled, but we were sure it had to be from the floor above us. I got up, and Aiden followed as I went to the bottom of the stairs and listened again. Very quietly, we could hear more thumps. They were softer, moving around the upper floor. Me and Aiden just looked at each other in fear, not moving or talking, knowing exactly what the thumps sounded like. It was like someone quietly walking around upstairs. Then, suddenly, a voice called out. "Aiden! Aiden!" He called out Aiden's name several times. His voice was deep, and Aiden clearly had no idea who it was. And even if he did, they'd still broken into my house while my parents were away. We quickly found a place to hide. It was a very small closet in the corner of the basement. Pretty sure it was the utility closet, with the water heater and stuff. And only seconds later, the basement door creaked open. We could see through the small cracks in the closet. The upstairs lights shined down the stairs into the dark basement, and after a pause, the man started walking down. He walked slowly, getting to the bottom and pausing to look around, then moving into the middle of the basement. When he noticed the TV was on, he stared at it, then called out Aiden's name again. "Aiden!" He began looking behind some of the boxes, and even opened one and searched through it for a minute. I knew that box had old photo albums and family gifts and stuff, so it was super creepy to watch this guy just looking through them. But after being down there for 5-ish minutes, he headed back upstairs. We heard his footsteps wander the upper halls for a while. Then it went quiet. After waiting in the closet for what felt like a whole hour, I finally snuck out, got my phone, and called for help. I'd waited so long, though, that the guy was already gone, and with how dark the basement was, we couldn't see any features of the guy to identify him with. Clearly, though, he knew who Aiden was, and found out he'd be alone at my place for the night, and was definitely stalking him, probably to kidnap him, and maybe even me too. It was an extremely disturbing situation, and I still talk to Aiden to this day, but nothing has ever come from it. We never saw that guy ever again.
I left around midnight after Dad threw a plate at my head again. It missed, but the explosion of ceramic against the wall told me everything I needed to know. I looked at my mom, who was passed out on the couch with an empty pill bottle on her chest. I grabbed my backpack and walked out of the place I'd been calling home. I was 15, with nowhere to go except Marcus's, my best friend, who lived about 40 miles north and had promised I could crash at his place anytime my folks let their addiction cloud whatever parental affection they had left. That night, I'd finally decided to take him up on it, but the problem was getting there with $7 in my pocket and a dead phone. I walked for 2 hours until I hit the highway. It was one of those empty stretches where you could stand in the middle of the road and not see a single soul for 10 minutes straight. When I finally saw headlights, my heart jumped. I stuck my thumb out, but the truck slowed before it even reached me. The guy rolled down the window and smiled. "Need a ride, kid?" I nodded and told him I was heading north. He unlocked the passenger door without taking his eyes off me. The guy looked maybe 40. He was clean-shaven and wore a gray hoodie that looked too expensive for someone driving a beat-up truck at midnight. "Thanks," I smiled, climbing in. The truck smelled like coffee and a stingy chemical that made my throat burn. The dude introduced himself as Carl as we pulled back onto the highway. For the first few minutes, it was quiet, but I could feel his eyes on me. "Rough night, huh? What, running away from home?" "I could tell. I've picked up my fair share of runaways over the years." He chuckled as he adjusted the rearview mirror to see me better. I remained silent. He clicked his tongue and asked, "So, how old are you, Jonah?" 18. I lied. He guffawed, muttering something condescending under his breath, before he told me how he knew I was lying and didn't look a day older than 15. My stomach dropped. He laughed at my face. "Perfect." He breathed the word out slowly, like he was savoring it. "That's the perfect age." The way he said it made my skin crawl. I watched him from the corner of my eye. He was drumming his fingers on the steering wheel in this weird rhythm. My throat was drying up. You sick? Got any allergies or medical problems?" His tone was conversational, but there was something underneath it that seemed eager. I shook my head. Good. He nodded to himself. "Does anyone know you're out here?" I lied and said my friend was expecting me and would call the cops if I didn't show. Carl glanced at me, and for the first time, the smile slipped. He asked what time. 1 a.m., I replied. He checked the dashboard clock. It was 12:45. The smile came back, but it was different now. "Plenty of time." We passed an exit sign for Route 47, but Carl didn't slow down. If anything, he sped up when I told him that it was my turn. "I know a better route." Suddenly, his voice had lost that friendly tone. I said I needed that exit, but Carl hardly responded. He just kept accelerating. Panic started to claw in. My heart was pounding as I reached for the door handle and pulled it, but it wouldn't work. I tried again, yanking harder. The handle moved, but the door stayed shut. Carl's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was ice cold. "Don't do that. The handle's broken from the inside." He let go, but kept his eyes on me too long before looking back at the road. I asked where we were going. "Somewhere nobody looks for runaway kids." He winked and started that finger tapping again. My hands were shaking. I was sweating despite the cold air. I wiped my forehead with my sleeve, and that's when Carl saw the scar on my forearm, thick and pink, running from wrist to elbow. Carl's whole body went rigid. He slammed the brakes so fast I lurched forward. He pulled onto the shoulder. His eyes were glued to my arm, and he suddenly looked furious. "What the hell is that?" I told him it was a scar that I'd gotten by climbing a fence to escape some guys who'd jumped me. "When? How long ago?" 3 weeks back," I replied. He sat there breathing through his nose, with the tapping getting faster, his jaw clenched tight. Finally, he got out and walked around to my side, and the door opened from the outside. "Get out!" Fear had made me freeze. He grabbed my arm and yanked me onto the gravel. I stumbled and almost fell. He was standing over me with his face twisted in disgust. "They want clean, perfect kids with no scars. Do you have any idea how much time I wasted on you?" His foot shot out and kicked me in the shin. I groaned and doubled over as he climbed back into the truck and peeled out, spraying gravel. I watched the taillights disappear down the highway until there was nothing but darkness and the sound of my own breathing. I stood there, trying to process what had just happened, trying not to think about what would have happened if I hadn't had that scar. It took 3 hours to limp to a gas station. Marcus picked me up. I never told him what happened. I'm 17 now and living with Marcus's family. I never told anyone about that night, but I think about Carl and the way he looked at me like I was merchandise, about the kids who got into that truck and were perfect, and I wonder how many of them are still alive.